I want to share with you something really cool that I just looked up that demonstrates my fascination with the generations. A long time ago, I did a project for the Library of Congress with a historian who just adored the Founding Fathers. She explained that unlike the boring paragraphs from history classes, these were guys who hung out at pubs and planned revolutions. Rather than whining about what they didn't like, they actually did something about it. This was the last time that Pluto entered Aquarius. Pluto has returned to Aquarius for the first time now since the American Revolution. Those times were chaotic, just like today. Everybody knew that important things were going to change. How would it happen? The Founding Fathers believed that people could do a better job than the rich and powerful king. We have fewer kings these days, but we have the same challenges again. Should we take matters into our own hands or leave it to the billionaires? I dug into the people involved the last time Pluto was in Aquarius in order to test my theories about the generations. I found a list of the main founding fathers and looked up where Pluto was when they were born, which generation they were in. With Pluto in Aquarius back then, as it is now, these generations will align very well with the generation labels that we're already familiar with. This is kind of how astrology works. I want to show you what I discovered and then explain why this is so fascinating. Let's start with Benjamin Franklin. He would be called a boomer in today's generational labels. He was born with Pluto and Leo, making him the oldest of the founding fathers. He's the one who pulled off all the business deals required to get funding for the American Revolution and how to persuade the colonies to participate in making a huge break from the status quo. And as a mentor, his role was to bring the talents out in everybody who was involved. He could use his experience to get the ball rolling, but the real hard work had to come from the younger generations. They were the ones that had to live with the consequences. So this list kind of describes the Pluto and Leo generation. Of course, it is rare a person who actually lives to the potential of their best self. Some do just the opposite. But the rest of the Founding Fathers team can demonstrate the top qualities of each generation back then and also today. So, what was Benjamin Franklin known for? He was the oldest of the crowd, and his specialty was in persuading others to think differently. He was self-assured and had a dramatic flair that made him a hit at gatherings. He knew how to use clothes to make a dramatic statement. If you look at it in current times, rock stars with their garish outfits and over-the-top personas originated from the current Pluto and Leo generation. Even as kids, these Pluto and Leos had to dress up for school each day and wear suits or white gloves and hats to church on Sundays. When Ben Franklin traveled to France, he dressed for maximum impact. He wore rustic clothes with his signature fur hat to emphasize the point that normal people can make a difference. His fur hats became a fashion fad in France. A side note that fake fur hats had a comeback in the mid-1950s because of TV shows like Davy Crockett and other things about pioneers. The young boomers wore fur hats, much like the kids today wear Spider-Man costumes. The boomers are Pluto and Leo generation 2, the first ones since Franklin's time. I'm consistently blown away by how these little details repeat themselves during these cycles. Franklin's sartorial choices weren't just eccentric. They were actually really strategic. By dressing plainly, he contrasted sharply with the powdered wigs and the ornate fashion of the French aristocracy, making himself a living emblem of the American cause. Ben was curious, and he liked to show off what he had discovered. He knew how to put on a show to garner attention. And then he would hit the party with his out there ideas of, hey, let's overthrow the king. Will you help us? Ben was fascinated with science, trying to learn about electricity. Now, think of like a boomer like Steve Jobs. He charmed the crowds with flashy demos to sell his dream. The same approach. Ben Franklin exemplified the best of Pluto and Leo. He used his uniqueness, his charisma, to support his higher purpose. He was a master of negotiation, balancing idealism with realism. He believed in hard work, thrift, and usefulness. He was a master at getting individuals to think differently about what was possible. These are the core values of many of our current Pluto and Leos, the baby boomers. Okay, so if Franklin was a boomer, what generation would George Washington be? George Washington had Pluto in Libra, the same degrees as those born at the end of the 1970s or early 80s, so that would be the Oregon Trail generation that came just before the Millennials. Compare George Washington's reputation with that of Ben Franklin. George was all about integrity and living true to his beliefs. He did things deliberately. He was a mix of stoic restraint mixed with strategic brilliance. This is Pluto in Libra in a nutshell. This is a generation that is wired to make the tough decisions, to weigh the ideal against what is realistic, to find solutions that are fair, and find what will work for everybody. They are decisive, resourceful, and always thinking ahead. George Washington read about 10 newspapers a night and studied books on political systems and global affairs. Our modern Pluto and Libras were the first to grow up with computers and the internet, and yet young enough to take advantage of local libraries and love paper books. George Washington dressed to show his values. He went for classic styles of the day so people would focus on his intellect rather than his clothing. So far, all this corresponds with my generational theory pretty well. Will it still work with the other generations? Thomas Jefferson had Pluto in Scorpio, so he should have a lot in common with today's millennials. Jefferson was fed up with what was going on in the world. He was willing to risk everything to inspire others to fight for a cause. He took the ideals of many statesmen, mostly his elders, and infused these ideas with passion and with an experiential tone. In his letter to King George, you might also know this as the Declaration of Independence, he called the king a tyrant who is unfit to rule a free people. And then he asked the king to leave us alone so we can decide our own future. This was the sentiment of the millennials almost 250 years ago, the last time Pluto was in Aquarius. Typical of those with Pluto and Scorpio, Jefferson was a brilliant paradox, a trait that the millennials have no problem with. They love to investigate, to learn the deeper meaning on a specific topic. They have little patience about putting together the big picture. They don't need to see how it all connects. They just want to solve the puzzle and move on. This is the source of the apparent contradictions, but they are cool with it. They don't really care so much how others see them, so long as they are appreciated. This generation has little interest in appearances, but are fully capable of putting on a show when it is necessary. The current Pluto and Scorpio generation were the first to grow up with the internet, and all information was available to them. The previous group, like Jefferson, took pride in access to knowledge mainly through his books. Okay, so Jefferson also preferred a life outside of the spotlight, so much that even as president, he avoided giving speeches whenever possible. And like Pluto's in Scorpio of all generations, he was passionate about experiences. He wanted an impressive home, and he wanted to be able to have room for his books and his gardens and the things he loved to experience, like music and fine foods. and the man loved his ice cream. He may be best known for writing the Declaration of Independence, but he also penned the first known recipe for vanilla ice cream in America. The man had taste, another thing in common with the Millennials. Okay, so far, this is working pretty well. What about Gen Z? That's always a tough one. Currently, this group is unhappy with the current world, yet they feel powerless to do anything about it. There were Gen Z founding fathers that had Pluto in Sagittarius, where the earlier generations set out to make self-government possible. The Gen Z of the day had to figure out the vision of how it could work. This was the toughest job of all. After a war with England, how do we create a society that works without a king? It's never been done before. These were the guys who actually created the U.S. Constitution. There are 3 of the founding fathers that have Pluto and Sagittarius. So these would be the Gen Z. James Madison, who's called the father of the Constitution, he had a vision and was able to mentor his team on how to gather ideas and inspire everybody involved. Gouverneur Morris, yes, Gouverneur was his first name. He was an impressive writer. So he was the one who crafted the final wording of the U.S. Constitution. And finally, there was Alexander Hamilton, who was in charge of figuring out how to finance the new country. For Pluto uses strategy, and Scorpio is driven by passion and experience. Sagittarius is a sign of creating the big picture from all the deep dives of the previous generation. Think of Indiana Jones and his quest for knowledge and discovery, Paul Atreides from Dune, or even Elsa from Frozen. These are all people who had a vision. And they could see something completely new and then figure out how to make it work. Now, these Gen Z founding fathers could easily have felt victimized by some awful things that happened early in their lives. Let's take Alexander Hamilton. He grew up in extreme poverty in the Caribbean, yet managed to become an aide to George Washington and later the first Secretary of the Treasury. Gouverneur Morris lost one of his legs in a carriage accident, and yet he was still known for his flamboyant style and fearless opinions. James Madison was only 5'4" tall, and he was physically weak. So he focused on developing his mind and became a political strategist. Then he went on to be the shortest president ever, and a pretty good one. These men, like the current Gen Z, were born with unique access to the optimism, energy, and fearlessness available when Pluto is in Sagittarius. Like with a hero's journey, they discovered their strengths and talents only when they were faced with overwhelming challenges. Okay, the cool part here is to see what each generation contributed to the founding of the United States. No one group did it all. Each has different interests, different strengths, and their own way of being in the world. Together, they were able to usher in a world where we could create a government that served the people. Never been done before. After 250 years, Pluto is in Aquarius again. And the world is once again feeling extremely chaotic, and we're encountering a lot of the same issues. And we are on the verge of some huge changes, and we don't know exactly how it's going to go or even what to do until we've done it. We each have a part to play in all of this. What we do matters, how we think and where we focus. We all need reminders of what we are capable of, to push us past our fears and get to the point where we can act. This is the challenge that Pluto provides, a different challenge for each generation. And now it is up to us how we respond. Please don't forget to subscribe or like this video so that you can see the next episode in this series when it comes out.